So you've probably seen the headlines, right? India's economy is on a tear, and the numbers are just massive. But what does a number that big actually mean for the 1.4 billion people living there? We're going to dive into this, because the real story is so much more complex and, honestly, way more interesting than any single headline.
$4 trillion. That's the magic number that officially makes India the world's fourth largest economy. And look, that is a huge milestone, no doubt. A moment of real national pride. But does it tell the whole story? Or maybe a better question is it the right way to measure success?
And that really is the core question we're digging into here. Is this incredible milestone a sign of genuine, broad-based progress, or is it more of a mirage? To find out, we have to look behind the curtain.
Okay, so let's start by looking behind that massive headline number. To really get a grip on the reality of India's economy, you have to see how that $4 trillion is actually carved up.
Because the truth is, India's economy isn't one single thing. It's deeply fractured. It's actually more useful to think of it not as one country, but as three totally different Indias, all living side by side. You've got the top 10%, the middle 40%, and the bottom 50%.
And the difference between them is just stark. The top 10%, we're talking about 120 million people, they live a lifestyle that's pretty comparable to someone in, say, Germany. Then you have the middle 40%, whose lives look a lot more like their neighbors in Bangladesh. And then there's the bottom half. That's over 1 billion people whose standard of living is closer to that of sub-Saharan Africa. Suddenly, a huge national GDP number doesn't feel so triumphant when over 1 billion people are still living in deep poverty, right?
You know, this massive gap is a classic red flag in economics. It points to a really well-known danger that developing nations face on their path to getting rich. It's an economic pitfall that has stalled so many promising countries, and it has a name: the middle income trap.
So what in the world is this middle income trap? And why is figuring out how to avoid it so absolutely critical for India's entire future?
Well, here's the simplest way to think about it. It's when a country gets stuck. It grows just enough that its workers start demanding higher wages. Suddenly, it's not the cheapest place to make t-shirts anymore. But, and this is the key part, it hasn't yet developed the skills or the innovation to design the next iPhone either. It gets caught in the middle, and its economic growth just grinds to a halt.
Now, this isn't just some abstract theory. To make this really hit home, let's look at two countries that stood at this exact same crossroads. Their stories, the cautionary tale of Malaysia and the incredible success of South Korea, really show the two potential futures that are lying in front of India right now. First up, Malaysia. In the late 20th century, everybody was calling it an Asian miracle. It was attracting massive foreign investment from huge companies like Intel and Sony, and they were all chasing one thing: really cheap labor.
And for a while, that strategy worked like a charm. Per capita income absolutely skyrocketed from less than $400 in 1970 to over $10,000 by 2011. But then, the miracle just stalled out.
And this quote right here just perfectly sums up why. As Malaysia got richer, wages naturally went up, but its whole economy was still based on assembling things, not inventing them. So the moment cheaper labor popped up in places like Vietnam, the factories packed up and left, and Malaysia was left stuck. Okay, now let's contrast that with South Korea. Back in the 1960s, it was actually even poorer than Malaysia, totally devastated by war. But it chose a very different and much more deliberate path forward. And this wasn't an accident. It was a strategic, multi-generational plan. The first generation provided the cheap, hard labor. The second generation, though, was pushed into science and engineering, learning how to design and improve products. And that set up the third generation to become the innovators who built global powerhouses like Samsung and Honda.
And the results of these two different paths? I mean, they're just staggering. South Korea's per capita GDP is now more than triple Malaysia's. One country made the leap over the middle-income trap, while the other fell right into it.
So this all brings us right back to India. The country is standing at that same crossroads, and frankly, it's showing some really alarming signs that it might be following in Malaysia's footsteps. There are three specific traps it seems to be walking right into.
Let's break these down. We can call them the education trap, the innovation deficit, and the manufacturing trap. And each one of these poses a really serious threat to India's future growth.
First, the education trap. Just let this statistic sink in for a second. This points to a massive, heartbreaking problem of underemployment. India is churning out millions of graduates, but the education system isn't giving them the actual skills needed for the high-value jobs that a country needs to escape that middle-income trap. Next up is the innovation deficit.
I mean, just look at the data. India's investment in research and development is a tiny fraction of its competitors. And the result? A country of 1.4 billion people is being out-innovated by South Korea, a nation with less than 4% of its population. You just can't build high-value industries without real innovation.
And finally, we have manufacturing. For all the big talk and the Make in India push, the sector's share of the economy has basically gone nowhere. It's just flat. Without a strong manufacturing base to employ its enormous workforce, India can't create the jobs to lift millions out of poverty, and it can't build the capacity to compete beyond just being a low-cost assembly line.
So, the situation looks pretty serious. How can India avoid these traps? Well, that South Korean blueprint gives us a really clear way forward. It's a framework we can call the 3 I's. Here it is, the 3 I's. First up, investment. You pour money into basic infrastructure to create those foundational jobs. Second, infusion. You bring in technology from other countries to move up the ladder from just simple assembly to actual design and improvement. And third, the final and hardest leap, innovation. This is where you shift the entire country's focus from copying to creating, and you fuel it with a massive investment in education and R&D.
So in the end, hitting $4 trillion is a huge achievement, for sure. But it's not the destination. The choice for India right now is incredibly stark. You can follow Malaysia's path into decades of stagnation, or you can commit to that difficult strategic journey that turns South Korea into an absolute economic powerhouse.
The policies and the priorities that are being set right now, today, are going to decide the outcome. The story of India's economy is far from finished, and the biggest question of all is, which chapter is it going to write next?